not need one. One run.
521.
Start me a card for a parking problem.
4 and you're 23.
Yeah, that's 4 over the 28 from one truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
From one truck, white Lincoln X-ray 985 should come back up next.
So you had 2000 Patrick Spalding.
10-4. If you can just put a little note in something like that, I'm going to be leaving a note on his vehicle advising him to remove it.
Rockingham 505. Enter vandalism case for Athens. Complainant, soon to be ex, slashed her tires and has made threatening comments to her. She's concerned he might return.
Yeah, forgive that to 32.
10-4. You're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Did you copy the 505?
Yeah, 4. Look at that.
21.
No, 3 and Depot Street. Truck boy entering 5.
7435.
10-4.
10-4.
You go 43 again.
143.
You go with that 43 you had. I didn't hear any, but I had just looks like we do.
10-4. I just wanted to know if you should be put back 76 to Cabana Circle or to the subject's address.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that town property case, and I'll be 76 to the Williams Road address to see if I can find the owner.
10-4. 449 1120.
449 1121, thank you.
10-4.
Code 4. 4.
Currently at 535.
Yeah, that was a great college.
535.
Should be. Got no for a woman who fucked into a house. I'll slide up that way.
Caller is now been able to close the front door. He's now pounding on the door, trying to get it still. to apply for a marker here. Got tine shirt on. Number 21
We have separation. Inboard now. She's right.
Hey guys, good to be back. Good to see you. Always checking to make sure the mic is working, looking at the chat. Somebody will tell me if the mic is not working. All right, guys. We got a lot of new stuff to go over tonight, including a new motion. This is interesting. I'm going to go over it and some important new insights that I've developed. So it's not going to be all just old rehashing. There is some new stuff here. Now, there are a lot of people that are new to this case that are just starting to tune in. And unfortunately, most of them will end up on the grifter channels. But this is not one of those channels. And a fair amount of these people will eventually see this video. They may not see it live, but they will see it. So what I'm going to do tonight is show you powerful evidence that proves Karen did this. But you might say, well, then this is not very interesting. It's just a hit and run. Oh, no. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. And I'm going to tell you. I'm going to start going into it for you. This case has become one of the most important cases of our time for a lot of reasons. And there are still big mysteries about why, for instance, the feds, the U.S. attorney, one of the most powerful positions in the country, corruptly interfered in a state murder case. In a state murder case. Unbelievable. And most importantly, we're in the middle of a mass hysteria. One where evidence and logic have become impotent against the power of belief. And those of us that value evidence and logic, sometimes it feels hopelessly outnumbered with what's going on in this case. But those of you that really value those things, like we do here, we need you. So please stay tuned. I want to, there's a lot of interesting graphics and things I can pull up. This is not going to, I promise you, this is not going to be just everybody looking at me. That would be not fun to watch. So let me pull up. This is something I came across last night, which is really interesting. Let's see. All right. So I was researching last night on ChatGPT key cycles, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. This is interesting to a lot of people that are questioning certain things about this case, and understandably. So it's not, if you don't know all the evidence in this case, there are a lot of things that make you stand back and wonder what's going on, right? So we have to admit that up front. There are mysteries. There are things that are going on here. So I'm looking up key cycles. And ChatGPT is a very useful tool. You have to be careful because you have to look and see what source it's getting its information. And it does always list the sources. Well, so down in the bottom of the sources, as I was searching this last night, what do I see? ARCA, ARCCA. That's the company that employs the two feds. That employs the two engineers that the U.S. attorney hired to look into this case. And this was the actual link that came up when I looked this up. This is from their website. Vehicle data for Toyota and Lexus accident investigations. Now, this is dated from 2021, so it's got nothing to do with this case. But this is something that was on their website where they look at this. They're specialists that look at this data. And they even claim that they're so good at looking at this vehicle data that they can recover images like this from the surveillance system that sometimes law enforcement themselves cannot recover. And here's an example of one that they were able to do that. So these pictures right there. So again, this is Toyota's vehicle data system, the EDR, which is called TechStream. Lexus is owned by Toyota. These guys are specialists in that. Okay, and yet they had no interest in getting that vehicle data for the murder of John O'Keefe. No interest. Look, if you parachuted in today and knew nothing at all about this case, nothing, and you heard that one thing, that the U.S. attorney hired this private company and these engineers testified in the trial, but as part of their testimony, They said that they had no interest at all in the vehicle data. They never asked the state for it. These are specialists in that. These are scientists. These are guys that went out of their way to make a special cannon that fires cocktail glasses at taillights. Okay, these are scientists. Scientists want all of the data they can, especially the most important data. And this is clearly the vehicle data is the most important data you would want if you're going to look at an accident reconstruction. They didn't want it. They didn't ask for it. They didn't reach out to the state and say, can you give us this data? They didn't even reach out to Karen Reed. Whatever evidence they did have was given to them by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and all the evidence that the U.S. Attorney's Office had on this case, other than what they did, for instance, looking at people's messages, all the evidence the U.S. Attorney had came from Karen Reed's defense team. Karen Reed's defense team had the vehicle data. They did not give it over. Why? These scientists didn't ask for it. Why? If that's all you know about this case, you know something corrupt is going on. You know it. You know something is corrupt enough to demand an independent investigation as to why those guys were hired to testify, hired to do, basically to come up with conclusions that would help Josh Levy's contention that John was not killed by a vehicle. Now, I don't know why Josh Levy had that contention, because we don't know of any evidence. I don't know. We know for a fact that we don't know what predicated the original launching of this investigation in August of 2022, way back then, long before Rich Green found any weird data on John's phone. We've never seen any indication what could have predicated that investigation. Yet, they not only launched an investigation, they put enormous resources into this. They got the FBI on it. They hired these guys from ARCA. Now, by last summer, the feds knew without a doubt that there was no conspiracy, that John was not killed in the house. They had enough information. They knew that. So let's just say hypothetically they were duped by David Yannetti and Karen Reed. It happens, right? Josh Levy's a smart guy, was a partner in Ropes and Gray, graduated, I think, second in his law school class from Princeton. Smart guy, but some people are book smart and not very street smart. Some people are good at taking tests but aren't very logical. I don't know Josh Levy, but it's not inconceivable that he's like that. So he could have been duped. But once you're duped, you do the right thing. Now, they knew by last summer, they knew that there was no conspiracy here. Trust me, nobody knew more than the feds, because they went in and got everybody's messages. They even got Courtney Proctor's messages. So they knew. Yet, Josh Levy himself did the questioning of a lot of these witnesses before the grand jury, grilled them. It takes days, if not weeks, to prepare to question a witness before a federal grand jury, before any grand jury. It takes a lot of preparation for that. These are the main witnesses. Why the U.S. Attorney's Office is extremely powerful. It's a very high-level job within the federal government. The only people above a U.S. attorney are, sorry, I got a message there. The only people above the U.S. attorney is the Attorney General, which is a cabinet level position in Washington, and the president himself. That's it. That's how powerful that position is. All right, I'm gonna have to turn my phone off. Sorry, I hate that pinging while I'm on the air. It's very distracting. Okay, sorry guys, you won't be able to. If you're gonna message me, I might see it, but I might not hear it now. That pinging drives me nuts. All right. So for some reason, the U.S. attorney, even though he knew by last summer that there was no conspiracy here, continued to push this, continued to grill these witnesses, and went out and hired these ARCA guys and made clear to them what he wanted. They knew what they were hired to do, and they went on the stand and did it. That's why they had no interest in getting the vehicle data. There's all kinds of other evidence they didn't get. They didn't get the evidence of the spray pattern of the taillight pieces, which is crucial evidence when you're trying to understand an accident reconstruction. They didn't get the evidence that showed that there were microscopic taillight pieces within John's clothing. They didn't get the DNA evidence. They didn't get it, and they weren't interested in it. They weren't interested in any of that because they weren't hired to solve what happened here. They were hired to make Josh Levy happy. And to make Josh Levy happy, they somehow had to help Karen Reed. That's their only purpose here. This is disturbing. This demands an investigation. It does. All right, so I want to get into the bulletproof data. And this is, I went down and matched this up to the second. Let me pull this up for you. I'll have to make this a little bit bigger. Now, I don't make fancy graphics like Turtle Boy's cameraman, Richie, Microdots. Talented guy, knows the truth, doesn't care. All right, this is the timeline, okay? And none of this stuff, this is all perfectly accurate. I carefully researched it. I'm going to explain to you exactly what is indicated by the evidence and what isn't. And I'm always going to be honest with you. So if there's something if there's some part of this where I'm speculating, I'll tell you that. If there's something that the defense challenged, I'll tell you that. Okay, so around 12:12, that's when Karen and John leave the waterfall. At 12:20 and 8 seconds, just make sure you guys can see that on the screen. Yeah, you can see it. Okay. 12:20 and 8 seconds. That's when I think they're on Dedham Street at that point. They're driving in the direction, but they had never been to 34 Fairview. And so John was talking to Jen McCabe on the phone, and she gave him the address. So John he opens up his Waze and he types in 34 Fairview. Now, these timelines are very important, so please watch them. So 12:20 and 8 seconds. All right. Now, there's multiple data streams here that we're working at. So we're looking at John's Waze data. So that comes off John's phone, the GPS data that comes off John's phone. And we're also looking at the vehicle data that was found on Karen's SUV. And then finally, we'll get to John's health app data. So at 12:23 and 46 seconds, and after I show this, I'm going to bring up the map too, to show you guys the map with these streets, because that's going to be also important as we go over the potential routes that you took home. And this is important to possibly identifying things like second degree. And we're going to get into all that. So at 12:23 and 46 seconds, pay attention to that 46 seconds. They drove by Fairview. They missed the turn. Okay, they're on Cedar Crest and they go by. Now, this is in red here because this is a data point that is registered by the vehicle data. So when they go by Fairview, we know that from the GPS and from the Waze. All right, so the Waze would have said you've missed your turn. And so that's in the evidence. Vehicle data does not have a timestamp. The vehicle data has it has a ticking, so it's measured in key cycles. So every time you start your car and you take a trip, and then when you end the trip and you turn the ignition off, that's a key cycle. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's essentially it. And it does record the length of that in seconds. I think it's in half seconds actually, but it does. So we know the length of your trip, whether it's 2 minutes or 3 hours, whatever. We know the length of it. So we don't know the time of that 3-point turn on that key cycle. We also don't know, because it's not indicated in any information that has been made public, what time that 3-point turn shows on the GPS or in the Waze. I don't know if that's in the data anywheres, but it's not in any of the documents that I read. So let me just skip forward one part of this, because the part that is shown, so she does a 3-point turn to correct for the missed turn. And then she turns around. Now she comes back to Fairview, and instead of taking a left because she's coming from the opposite direction, she's going to take a right. And Ryan Nagel, the truck that he's in, that's driven by Ricky D'Antonio, comes from the other side. And because Karen has the right of way, they let Karen go. So that time, again, important. The seconds matter here. They matter a lot. 12, 24, and 18 seconds. Okay, so that shows up. That's from John's GPS and from his Waze. Now, so let's just go back to this one right before this. So what time was the 3-point turn? Well, it was somewhere between 12:23 and 46 and 12:24 and 18 seconds. So I think that's 32 seconds, right? So it's somewhere in the middle of that 32-second period. We don't know to the exact second, but we know it's somewhere in the middle. So if you look in the middle, that's really very close to exactly 12:24. So I think it's reasonable to say that Karen made that 3-point turn at 12:24 and 00 seconds, but understanding that there's a margin of error. So it could be 5 to 10 seconds before that or 5 to 10 seconds after that. And you see why we don't have the exact thing. All right, so they make the right-hand turn onto Fairview, and the truck that Ryan Nagel is in makes the turn right after that, following them. So you can see there, that's 12:24 and 18 seconds. So at 12:24 and 40 seconds, we see from the GPS and the Waze that the position of John's phone is already at the edge of the property. So she's got at the 18-second mark, they take the turn. Maybe it takes whatever, 4, 5, 6 seconds before they arrive in front of 34 Fairview, but they're not there long at all because they pull ahead and they're there by 12:24 and 40. So they really, really did. It's not like they pulled up and sat, say, in front of the mailbox. It's not like they sat there for a minute. It was less than that. It was only seconds, and then they pulled forward. Now that GPS position, 12:24 and 40 seconds, that's exactly where. So the position has a margin of error that's going to vary depending on signal strength. But the basic margin of error, if you're getting good signal, is usually 15 feet. So John's phone was found within that 15-foot radius of where they last stopped. So this is the last position of John's phone. It's already reached there by 12:24 and 40 seconds. That doesn't mean he got out of the car at that time. So if he gets out of the car and doesn't walk more than a few feet and he gets hit, it's going to show the same position because he's still within that 15-foot margin of error. And there must have been a little bit of movement, though, in terms of that position. So the very last GPS position is recorded at 12:25 and 36 seconds. But they're already at the edge of the property, and he's found at the edge of the property. So this was very minor movement that was found there. Now, I got this in red. This is the key. This is the vehicle data that shows Karen's SUV. It pulls forward for a few seconds and then suddenly goes in reverse. It goes backwards 62 feet. The accelerator is depressed 75%, and it reaches 24 miles per hour, and it strikes a pedestrian-sized object. Now, what I want you to note is the time here, okay? Now, I haven't listed the time of that incident, but we can tell very, very close to where it is. So remember going back, so all right, so the vehicle data shows that this second incident that was triggered to create an event within the data stream was 8 minutes and 4 seconds after the 3-point turn. Now, I think actually it's because the way that this is, we'll talk a little bit, let's talk for a moment about the way this vehicle data works. So you're in your car, you have this vehicle data, the EDR, and these streams are coming in from your brakes, your steering wheel, the sensors, all kinds of stuff. And it's running continuously, but it's not recording. It's only recording a small period, and it doesn't even actually keep that as a recording. So what happens is there are algorithms in there within the chips that are processing this information coming in, and if it senses something that the algorithms have told it to say, whoa, there's an event there. That's called a trigger. So if something triggers an event, what it does is it takes a snapshot from 5 seconds before that event and 5 seconds after that event. So a normal 3-point turn would not trigger, obviously a collision. So if you get in a car accident, or if you drive into the telephone pole, a major collision like that, that's going to record an event. Here, there was no collision that caused an event to be recorded. There was no collision that triggered an event. However, you have at the 3-point turn, the nature of that turn did trigger an event. And Trooper Paul explained that that's because during that 3-point turn, when she had the car in reverse, she put the accelerator down over 30%. And so the algorithm says, okay, more than 30% in reverse, that's enough to trigger an event. So it creates an event on that 3-point turn. Well, so the next event, now most key cycles will have no events on them. It has to take something a little bit unusual to happen. So the vast majority of key cycles on your car will not have any triggering event. But something unusual has to happen like this, that the algorithm results in the triggering of an event. So we don't know the exact, as I said, going back, we don't know the exact time of that 3-point turn, but it's within 32 seconds of what I told you before. So, and as we said, that is about 12:24 and 0 seconds. It's about exactly 12:24. Now it might be 5 to maybe even 10 seconds before or after that, but it's very close to that. And I would say the margin of error might be 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after. So, but it's a really good 12:24 is the midpoint of when they turned around. It took 30 seconds. It took 32 seconds for Karen to drive by Fairview and to do a 3-point turn and come back to Fairview. That took 32 seconds. So if you put that 3-point turn in the middle of that journey, that part of it, the journey, then that puts it at exactly 12:24 and 0 seconds. So 8 minutes and 4 seconds after that, there's another event that's triggered. Now, again, because as I'm saying, the triggering works where when an event is triggered, it takes a snapshot going back 5 seconds and forward 5 seconds. So really the event probably happened, seems to have happened 8 minutes and 9 seconds because you got to go 5 seconds backwards. So 8 seconds and 9 seconds after that 3-point turn. That's when the event takes place where Karen goes back 62 feet at 24 miles an hour. So if we know, then that's that the 3-point turn was roughly 12:24 and 0 seconds, then that means that the event, the triggering event, was 12, where the second one, where she went backwards, begins at 12:32 and 4 seconds. With a margin of error. So if the actual striking of John was maybe 5 seconds after that. So I would say that the event with John, I'm sorry, I'm talking a little bit not as smoothly as I should. I'm trying to be clear about this. 12:32, maybe in 4 seconds, maybe in 9 seconds, is the closest indication of where the Lexus struck John. 12:32 and 4 seconds, maybe as much as 12:32 and 9 seconds, but there's a margin of error of, say, 5 to 10 seconds either way going before or after that. So very close to 12:32 is when John was struck. And then we get to the last bit of data on this. So according to the health app on John's phone, it last moved at 12:32 and 16 seconds. That matches up incredibly closely. I mean, ridiculous, right down to the seconds where he struck. He's knocked, say, 10, 15 feet onto the lawn. He's lying on his phone. We know there was vomit found on him, so there was a little bit of movement. But the last movement is 12:32 and 16 seconds. That just matches up with that timeline is bulletproof. You can't knock a hole in that. That timeline is bulletproof. Now I'm going to go into some of the holes that people want to knock in this, but you really can't. So first of all, a question might come up is, why do I dispute the health app data that shows John walking up and down stairs, but accept this part of the health app data? Well, that's pretty easy, because if you look at the health app data, it's getting information about John's movements, and then it's trying to interpret what those movements are. So it showed last movement at 12:32 and 16 seconds. Okay. But the earlier, no one is questioning. So when the app showed John going up and down stairs, no one's questioning whether or not John was moving. We're questioning whether the data whether the algorithm correctly interpreted that data that showed what the movement was. So John's GP. So at the time that Rich Green says that the health app says that John was going up and down stairs, that's during a period when John's Waze and GPS, which is extremely accurate location data, shows that he was on his way in the car. So no one's questioning the fact that John's phone was moving at that time. It's just a question of whether the algorithm correctly interpreted what that movement was. And it clearly did not. The algorithm decided that John was going up and down stairs when in reality, he was in the car. Now, there are different things that lead to that. There are sensors built into your iPhone. It's a very sophisticated device. And it's not just a matter, when I first looked at this last year, I assumed that the phone would use a simple formula of calculating elevation changes and speed to try to make a determination if someone's going up and down stairs. So last summer, when I was first thinking about this, I'm thinking, well, maybe Karen was driving really slow, right? And so she's going slow and there's a slight change of elevation. No, it's not how it works. It does calculate those things like change in elevation and speed into it, but it also calculates perhaps even more, and it weighs this more heavily, the movements of your phone. So it's got sensors in there that can determine these kind of changes. And you can find this by looking it up. This is not Kevin from Yellow Cottage Tales making something up. You can look this up. All right. If you're in your car and you have your phone in your hand and you're moving it like you're talking. So John did have his phone in his hand because he's talking to Jen, and he's texting Jen, and he's arguing with Karen. If he's moving that phone, the algorithm in the health app can determine that as being walking up and down stairs, especially if it's combined with the elevation. Now, my sister and her husband were driving on the Cape a couple of weeks ago, and they had the same thing happen to him. She happened to be looking down on her cell phone, and it showed her as walking up and down stairs when they were in the car. So this is not an uncommon thing at all. And when you put the data of the health app trying to interpret what you're doing next to the data of GPS location and the Waze data of location, it's not really comparable. If you have to choose which is better data, clearly the GPS data is excellent data. That's designed for the military to fly a missile through somebody's window. And just the last part of this, we'll get to the next part of the story here. At 12:36, Karen's phone connects to John's Wi-Fi in the driveway. So we're going to get to that because it's important, and I've had some new insights on that I think that you guys will appreciate. Now, before I get to that, one of the objections that people have had to the GPS data showing what time Karen and John arrived at the intersection and turned right. So let me scroll back up to that. This is not the easiest. You have to scroll with the. All right. So at 12:24 and 18 seconds, that's when she arrives at the intersection at the same time as the pickup truck driven by Ricky D'Antonio coming from the opposite direction. Within that truck is Ryan Nagel. Now, Ryan Nagel, people will say, people object, texted his sister, "I'm here," at 12:23. So they say that that's what time Ryan Nagel was outside the house. Well, we don't know what that's based on, but it's probably based on the testimony of Ryan Nagel. Ryan Nagel's phone is not part of the discovery material, so we don't have his phone data, and neither is Julie Nagel's phone part of the data. So it's possible that investigators looked at that phone just to see that time. I don't know, but it's also possible that Ryan Nagel just said he looked at it and said, all right, it was 12:23, and he testified to that. But we don't have that time down to a second. We don't know that if Ryan Nagel texted his sister at 12:23 and 45 seconds, for example. But even more importantly, we don't know the position of where that truck was when that message was sent. Now, Ryan Nagel has been out drinking with his friends and his girlfriend all night, and he's now a good brother coming back to pick up his sister. She's been drinking too. It's 12:30 at night. They just want to get home, right? And this is a chore. So she ended up inviting him into the house, and they didn't go. They had no interest. So they just want to pick up his sister and get home. Okay, that's understandable. So what is he going to do? Ryan Nagel is a passenger, so his hands are free. And more than likely, when he's 2 or 3 blocks away, that's when he sends the text, "I'm here." Now, you can say, I don't know that. No, we don't know exactly where Ryan Nagel was when that happened. But we do know where Karen's car was at 12:24 and 18 seconds because GPS data is very reliable. It's the most reliable data there is. And that's when she made that turn. And there's no reason to think, based on the testimony, that Ryan Nagel is lying. They arrived at the intersection at the same time, and they pulled up behind her. The defense doesn't question that. Also on that, while we're on the topic of Ryan Nagel, another thing I picked out recently looking through the documents is this. So one of the big questions that has come up all the time, it's mystified me too, and Vinny brought this up a lot of times on Court TV. Why didn't Ryan Nagel, how was he able to see through Brian Higgins' Jeep, if that Jeep was parked there, and actually see Karen's taillight? Because Ryan Nagel testified that the brake lights were on. And you say, well, how could he see that if he was parked behind the Jeep? And actually, he testified that he didn't see the Jeep. So it's not really certain that the Jeep was there at that time. But when I went back and looked at the actual testimony, what Ryan Nagel, he didn't say that he saw the brake lights on the taillight. What he said he saw was, if you look at Karen's vehicle, she has a brake light in the rear window. And this was in the report, in the charging document going back a year and a half ago. So long before anybody would have even been thinking about where was Higgins. But it's in there that that's what he saw, was the brake light in the back of the window. So if the Jeep was there, it wouldn't have blocked that. So either the Jeep was there and it didn't block it, and he was able to see that brake light from there, or Ryan Nagel just doesn't remember, or Ryan Nagel doesn't remember seeing the Jeep. And like I said, the Jeep was there. Or it's possible that Jeep wasn't there. Higgins testified that he left between 12:30 and 1. But it's possible that his memory's a little bit off on that and he left a little bit sooner than that. I think it's very reasonable to think that he did, and it's not suspicious. Who knows exactly the timing of these things? So there's nothing really suspicious about that. I want to... let's go to the map for now. And then I want to come back to a similar thing that really highlights second degree. Not as bulletproof as this, but pretty powerfully. I mean, this is bulletproof that shows that Karen absolutely struck John's vehicle. There's no other way to get around that. There's no way, like, for instance, people want to entertain the theory that Michael Proctor took Karen's Jeep in the police parking lot and sped it up to 62 feet. And that's where that data cycle comes from. But it doesn't make sense. because it's more than just so first of all, Trooper Paul matched the mileage. So from Karen's trip, from the waterfall to 34, and then 34 back to One Meadows. There are a few different routes that she took, and there's a range. And I think the difference is maybe a difference is a half mile. I'm not sure exactly on that, but I think it was a half mile, or might have been, so it might have been 0.7 miles or something like that. So that's a range that Trooper Paul testified that he used to match that key cycle to the one where the triggering events were. But the other thing is like I just pointed out, you have the triggering events of, you have two weird triggered events within that key cycle. The first one is the 3-point turn, and the second one is the time when she hit John. And those match up perfectly with John's data, as I already just showed. So there's no way Proctor could have anticipated that and recreated that in the parking lot. There's no way. It's just too much. It's just too much. There's no level of genius that could have figured something like that out. And Michael Proctor is just a regular, ordinary cop. He's not a genius. And I don't even think it didn't even have that data then. This because they would have had to do that in the few days afterwards. There's no way they would have mapped that data out yet. So there's just no way that was fake. So that is very powerfully, beyond a reasonable doubt, that key cycle matches up to what happened here. So I want to bring in Google Maps. So I want to try to figure out what are the possible routes that Karen took home. Now let me zoom in a little bit on this here. Okay. So you see 34 Fairview there. That's the second house down. So you can see Cedar Crest Road up above. So Karen, when she came with John, they approached, instead of taking the left-hand turn onto Fairview, they missed it. So they had to do the 3-point turn a little bit up here and then come around and come back down. But how did she get home? We don't know, because Karen's GPS was off, and that's not suspicious. We used to think it was, but it turns out that she was in airplane mode, and she probably had turned it up, put it in airplane mode when she traveled to Aruba. So I would say it's not suspicious, and because it was off before this happened. So we don't even see on her GPS, for example, her traveling there. However, it's unfortunate because now we don't know what route that she took home, and we'll never know. They tried to piece it together with Ring Video, but they never were able to say for certain. Now, if you go into Google Maps and punch in map directions from 34 to One Meadows, it pulls up 3 different routes, and they all take from 5 to 6 minutes. But one route that doesn't come up is actually the one that I think Karen took. Now, we could be wrong. Kevin Mahoney believes that, and with solid reasoning here, that Karen backed up 62 feet, but then pulled forward to leave. And when she pulled forward, she would have had to have driven by John's body. So that would be powerful evidence for second degree. That would be evidence that she knew she struck him and that she passed him by. I myself don't believe the evidence supports that at this point, because she didn't know the neighborhood. So I think what she did was, I don't think she was trying to hit John. I think she was backing up. She's angry. That 3-point turn that she did earlier triggered an event because she punched the gas while it was in reverse then too, even though she was just turning around. So she's driving like a very angry woman. And probably, because of the argument that she had just had. So I think she went back in reverse 62 feet and then did do a 3-point turn, which is, she told Trooper Proctor and Mechanic the next day that she did a 3-point turn. I think she probably did. And she turned around and went back the only way that she knew how to get back to One Meadows, which is, by the way, they had just came up Cedar Crest. And it's also a very easy way with it only has a few turns on it. So let me make this a little bit bigger. Oops. Actually, let's make it smaller so we get the overview. So here's Cedar Crest here. So here's the thing, Karen, so what I'm saying is the data shows that the accident happened at 12:32. Now, Adam Lally said in his closing arguments 12:30. I don't think that's accurate. I think he shaded it towards 12:30 because he wanted to make it seem like Karen had enough time to get home, because she pulls into the driveway at 12:36. We don't know if it's 12:36:00 or 12:36 in 59 seconds. That data was not given to us, so we don't know the time down to the second. So could Karen? The question is could Karen have made the trip home? So let's say that she pulls into the driveway at 12:36 and 30 seconds. So in the middle of that minute. Could have been later, it could have been earlier. But let's just put it we're trying to see if it was possible. So let's put it in that minute. So if that's the case, then it would take her basically 4.5 minutes to make this trip. Now, if you look at Google Maps, let me just take a little drink for a second, guys. But if you look at Google Maps, it calculates it to be 7 minutes if you take the route I'm going to show you here. Not the fastest route, right? It doesn't seem possible, right? But I'll show you, it's very possible. So if she goes the way I think, she goes down Cedar Crest, and you see why it's the longest way. Then she takes a right on Dedham Street. These are main streets here, so she would know them. So here's Dedham Street. I'll get a sense of the length here. I zoomed in down to street level, and check this out. I'm not going to do it for you, but I could not find a single stop sign. And then I also checked with people from Canton, and they said there's no stop signs. So she takes a right here and goes down Dedham. I don't know what the speed limit is. I'm going to guess it's only 30 miles an hour. It might be 35. But it would be easy to race down this thing at night. You see you going at it. It's a long stretch of road here, and there are no stop signs. Now, then you get to the bottom here, and you have to take a left on Washington. There is a stoplight there. So she would have to probably time it well, where she hit this light and it turned pretty quick. And I don't know how long that light is. But let's say she timed it well and she hit a green light here. She goes left. There's another stoplight here, but it's a right on red. So you really just have to come to one of those famous Massachusetts stop and roll kind of thing. Then you go down a long stretch of Pleasant Street. Now, this street also, I checked it out. As far as I can tell, does not have a single stop sign. And you see it's a long stretch here. And it's a road where locals tell me you can get your speed up. And so look at that. It's a very long stretch of road. And then you just take a quick left, and then you're at John's house. The driveway's right there. So a very simple drive. I would understand why Karen would want to do it. She's not from Canton, but she would know main roads like that. And she's an intelligent person. She just had a memory of having driven a similar path to get to Fairview in the first place. So she could easily punch it up to 55 miles an hour going down Pleasant Street. More if she's really driving angry. Oops, didn't mean to pull on that person's house. So I also calculated, and I put it in through, I did this again through ChatGPT. I put in the address, and I put in the route going from 34 to to One Meadows. And I put in the route going by Dedham Street and Pleasant Street. And I put in the average speed of 35 miles an hour. So not something outrageous, 35 miles an hour. And it calculated that it would take 4.5 minutes to get there. That's exactly the perfect timing that we need. 4.5 minutes would put her there at about 12:36.5 minutes. So the average speed of 35, you still have a stop light, and so there's a couple of spots you have to stop to take turns. There's only a few turns though. So mostly it's straight long stretches of road. So let's say you're driving 50 miles an hour on Dedham Street. So here's Dedham Street there. Let's say you're driving 55 miles an hour on that. Let's just say 50. You're driving 50 miles an hour on Dedham Street and 50 miles an hour on Pleasant Street. Cedar Crest, there are some stop signs. So let's say you're just kind of, she's angry. She's just kind of slowing and blowing through and slowing down a little and then blowing through and making sure nobody's coming. So maybe on Cedar Crest Street, she's only able to average 35 miles an hour. Then she has to slow down and take a turn here on Dedham Street. Then on Dedham Street, she punches it up to 50 miles an hour. Then you got to take a left and then a quick right up here. And then you really got a long stretch on Pleasant Street that you could punch it again up to 50 or 55 miles an hour. It is not hard at all for her to average 35 miles an hour on that route. Not hard at all. I would almost say it's probably expected. So to me, driving angry the way she was going that route, I would actually expect that she would take about 4.5 minutes to get there. And that puts her arriving at exactly 12:36 in the driveway. Now, this is where another mystery I think I solved for you today. So I've always wondered, I'm sure many of you have, why would Karen delete the Ring video of her coming home? It's missing. So there's only 2 videos missing. There's one of Karen coming home, and the other one is of her leaving with Kerry and Jen, and with Kerry and Jen. And Kerry and Jen both testified that at that point, Karen showed her a broken taillight. So the 2 things that these things would have in common would be Karen showing the women the broken, or Karen herself looking at the broken taillight. So the question was, why would Karen look at her taillight in the driveway? Why wouldn't she just pull into the garage first? Like, I'm thinking, if I was in an accident up the street and I wanted to look at my taillight, I'd pull into the garage first. And that's because that's the natural end of your trip. And then you go out and you look at your taillight. Why didn't she do that? Well, the answer is so obvious. It annoys me that it took me all this time to think of it. It annoys me that no one else thought of it either. Karen doesn't live there. Karen doesn't normally park there. It's a 2-door garage, but I think John has a sports car or something like that that is in the other one. She was only parking there. Then he moved his car out because there was a blizzard coming. But she normally parked in the driveway. So and I didn't check to see any sources on this, so I don't know. But to me, the logical thing is that Karen did not have a garage opener in her car for John's garage. She didn't have it. So for her to park in the garage, she had to stop in the driveway, get out of the car, get into the house, and go into the garage and then open it from inside there. So I want to play something for you. This is one of the voicemails. All right, so this is I'm going to pull this up for you.
If you could have the second message.
Okay, so I'm going to play this in 1 second, but this is This is the first voicemail that Karen left for John, and this is important to try to piece together these moments. All right, so this voicemail came on John's phone at 12:42. Now, going back a year ago, Turtle Boy had reported that Karen got home at 12:42, got home to John's house at 12:42. Now, why? How do they know that? Well, the way they set it back then was that you can hear Karen's boots on the ground, presumably of the garage, and that you can hear the garage door opener. This is what Turtle Boy had reported a year ago. I believe that was accurate. I believe Karen told him the truth about that. She just didn't tell them that she had already pulled into the driveway. Karen was only telling him the bits and pieces, right? That to make the narrative that she wanted to make. So listen to this tape here. This takes place at 12:42. We know she clicked that her phone connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36. So that's when she pulled into the driveway. But this is what she left at 12:42, and unfortunately, there'll be a interruption in the middle from some sirens from fire engines going by the courthouse. But
Sorry, Ms. Gilman, if you could pause right there, please. I apologize. I just wanted the siren to go by.
Oh, that's fine.
And before Ms. Gilman presses play again, Trooper Garino, what time is the second message?
12:42.
Ms. Gilman, if you could.
okay, so I'm going to play this one more time. We'll try to listen to the things that we're trying to. So we hear the boots here. That's pretty clear. So we don't know, is that the boots of Karen in the garage? Well, we don't know. That could be, she could be in the kitchen or something like that, right? We don't know. So we have to listen to other noises here. And again, Turtle Boy had initially reported that we hear the garage opener. So we'll see if we can hear that. But we hear something else here. And I think it's a dead giveaway. I didn't really understand what this was when I heard it through the trial, but I think I can understand it now. So let me play it again.
Ms. Gilman, if you could have the second message.
All right, let me just pause it there for a second. What do you guys think that is? You know what that is? When you pull into your garage, you have sensors that are warning you when you're getting too close to the workbench that's in front of you or whatever. Those are beeps. Exactly. So what happened here was Karen got home at 12:36. I don't know if it's a key code alarm. I think I seem to remember hearing that to get into the house, or if there's a key. But in any case, she certainly has a key, and she has the key code. She goes into the house. But before she goes into the house, she stopped and looked. I'm going to play a message for you because there's a message at 12:36. But let's just finish this one here. But I think she stopped and looked at her taillight, and that's why she had to delete that ring video later. It's the only reason. Why? Because if she just pulled in and then just went straight into the house, there'd be no reason to delete that video. So I believe she looked at it, and that's why later she wanted to delete it. She went into the house, whether it's through a key or a key code on the alarm. I don't know what's there. There's no reason she had to go straight into the garage. She's been drinking all night. Maybe she goes to the bathroom first. We know that she makes a quick call. I'm going to play that for you in a second. But then she goes into the garage, opens it from inside, goes out into her car, and then pulls in. Now that message is left at 12:42 as she's pulling in, and that beeping there are her senses warning her you're getting close to an object. So whatever's in George's, whatever junk or objects or walls or whatever are inside John's garage, she was being warned that you're getting within 5 feet of them. And that's what that sounds like. And that's going to, it's not going to sound, that's the way it's going to record. That's the way it would sound if it was recorded. So we'll finish that up.
Sorry,
I'm going to play the other message.
right there, please. I apologize. I just wanted the siren to go by.
Oh, that's fine.
And before Ms. Gilman presses play again, Trooper Garino, what time is the second message?
12:42.
Ms. Gilman, if you could.
All right, so that noise that's behind, so you clearly hear the boots on the floor. I think that's what that is. And the noise that is behind that, we don't know for sure what it is, but it's going to get distorted through this voicemail. And this is obviously now something that was played in court, so it's further distorted. But I think there's a pretty good chance that Karen was telling Turtle the truth, and that is the garage door opener. That's probably what that is. It's closing now. So I think I think she pulled in at 12:42. She pulled into the driveway at 12:36, and she pulled into the garage at 12:42 because she had to go in the house. But here's a key thing too. I want to play the first voice message that she's. This is pretty powerful. All right. So again, as I play this.
First voicemail, what time did this occur?
12:37 a.m.
And with the court's permission, if I could play that for the jury.
I just paused it for a second to remind you. This is at 12:37. At 12:36, she pulls into the driveway. Presumably, she gets out and looks at the taillight and sees all the damage. There's damage not only to the taillight, there's extensive damage to the frame above the bumper, and to the left of the bumper, there's a dent. There's a long, jagged scar. It looks to me like it's about 16 inches. So let me turn my phone back on, just trying to get multiple things at the same time. But what is it that Lisa has a story? I'm seeing chat. There's somebody named Lisa that has a story. So I'm going to check my email. Hopefully she's a juror. That would be kind of the main thing. So if we have a juror that could reach out to us, that's what's really needed here, given that we'll get more into the motion in a little bit, but the Turtle jurors are reaching out to Alan Jackson. So we need one of those diligent, honest jurors to reach out, if not to the mainstream media, to me, where I'll give you all the time that you want to explain your story logically. So hopefully now some of those jurors, I mean, the jury, the foreman, and I don't know if it was a man or a woman, there were some indications at the end that I think that it was a man, but those notes that were sent to the judge were so well written. The words chosen so carefully. So that would be fantastic if that person could come on with us and tell the story of what happened. If you're a juror and you happen to be listening to this show for the first time, I cover this factually, logically, and with evidence. That's it. I'm not on anybody's side. I'm not connected to the prosecution. I'm not connected to the police. I'm just giving you logical analysis. When I get something wrong or get bad information, I correct it. There aren't a lot of people out there covering this case with integrity anymore. It's disturbing, but I will always promise you that. So if you want to come on this channel, that's how I'm going to treat it. That's how I've done every show since I've been doing this. That's how I've done my whole life. And it sounds to me like the people on that jury, most of them are like that too. So hopefully they'll come on. But again, 12:36, Karen pulls into the driveway. She presumably gets out and looks at the taillight. At 12:37, this is the first message that she leaves John. And actually, so the collision was at 12:32. The first call to John was at 12:33. And then on the way home, she's calling like every 30 seconds to every minute. She calls him multiple times while she's driving home. She's just hitting send over and over again on the call. But she doesn't leave any messages on those calls. The very first message that she leaves is this one here at 12:37, after presumably she has just looked at her busted up car.
Yes.
John, I hate you. I effing hate you. So we have to interpret these things, but I believe that she left this message to John seconds after seeing the damage to her car. Now, does that mean that she knew that she hit John? No. In fact, I don't even think that she did. We may never know unless she tells. We'll never know because we can't tell if she's ever going to tell us the true story. So I have put my email up here. So Lisa, I will look for your email. And all right. So Lisa, if I see your email, you can tell me what you were working, what you did with Karen. And if you want to come on the show, you can do that. But I have to be careful because I don't know you. So Kelly emailed me, but Kelly is not Lisa, right? So if you're telling me Lisa wants to come on, okay, it's hard to do all this while you're live. So the only thing, Kelly, I'll get back to you after. Thank you. I will get back to you after the show. But if Lisa has my email and she wants to come on the show, she can send me a quick one telling me what she wants to talk about. And if she's interested, I'll be glad to give her the link and she can come on and talk. So, but I just have to vet her a little bit. I want to be fair to everybody, obviously, including Karen. So I don't want someone to come on here that claiming to be something that they may not be. So I have to be really careful about that. So again, 12:37, Karen leaves. John, I hate you. She's just looked at her taillight, at her busted taillight. What was she thinking? I don't believe that she thought that she hit John at that point, but she's looked at her vehicle and she sees significant damage and she blames it on John because John's the reason she got angry. John's the reason she went to 34 Fairview. John is the reason that she went backwards 24 miles an hour. So she's blaming John. So I believe that's the reason for the angry message at that time. But you guys can tell me what you think. To me, that seems logical. Now, let me pull up another. Let's see. We got Ryan. All right. I'm going to pull up another chart that I made that shows, I call it the timeline to second degree. It's not as convincing as the rock solid proof that Karen actually struck John with her SUV. So, but I think it's all combined together, it's powerful enough for most, whether someone could convict beyond a reasonable doubt based on this, I don't know, but I think any reasonable person would look at this and say, yeah, she knew what she did and she cost John her life. So again, beyond a reasonable doubt, it may be hard to do that with this here. Maybe if you look at the combined evidence, we'll be able to do it. I want to just briefly talk too about the attacks on Paul O'Keefe. Are you freaking kidding me? You people are attacking Paul O'Keefe, the brother of the victim, because he doesn't believe in one of the most absurd conspiracy theories in the world? You're going to attack him for that? You're not even a man. Any person that goes on YouTube and does that, if you're a male, you're not a man. You're not a man. You're attacking this person, what? So you can get views? It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Even if you think there's something funny going on in this case, Paul has more information than you do. Paul has not only now sat through the whole trial, he's always had information, and he saw Karen. He dealt with Karen that morning in the house. And he liked Karen. Wished and blew her a kiss at the hospital. At that point, he had no suspicions. It was things that happened in the house that made him suspicious. It had nothing to do with Michael Proctor or Brian Abbott or Jen McCabe selling him on some theory. It's what he saw in the house. Okay, so he knows more than you. He knows more than me. To be attacking him, there's something wrong with you. For anybody that is attacking Paul O'Keefe, there's something wrong with you. And not only that, because the system failed him here, the evidence was bulletproof that showed Karen did this, but it was not presented in a bulletproof way at all. Now, I'm not trying to, I understand that Adam Lally had an enormous challenge. Great. I'm fine with Lally doing it again. Great. But recognize the mistakes that were made were deep mistakes. And the main reason the prosecution lost this case had nothing to do with Alan Jackson. And maybe it had something to do with Karen putting all these constant false reports out in social media. Yeah, that could have had something to do with it. But really, the state did not make a compelling case, and nobody thinks it did. It had compelling evidence. It presented that, but it did not present it in a way that was clear to the jury. So they'll get another chance at it. But because the state let Paul down, I mean, I'm not saying Paul's saying this. I'm sure Paul would not agree with me saying that. So this is my opinion. But because the state let Paul down, and because the federal government corruptly intervened in this case, Paul is now faced with the additional burden of having to go on the offensive here. And so you've seen him on the news very intelligently and articulately explaining the issues here. But he's up against the world now because you have this conspiracy sells. You have TMZ doing stories on it now. You have New York Post, to some degree, Court TV. They're all trying to go after the more salient aspect of it. And the only thing that makes it interesting is if there's a conspiracy. If it's just a hit and run, it's not interesting to the media. So they're all exploiting that. And so that's what Paul has to face, and his family have to face that. So he's had to suffer the loss of his sister, now his brother. Now he's had to go through this whole 2-year preparation for the trial. Now the trial, have to sit there every day in court to be the strength of your mom and your dad. Now he's got to go through it again. But on top of all that, he's the one that has to take on the corrupt federal government. He's the one that has to go against this tide of this sea of zombies that isn't interested in the truth, that is completely impenetrable when it comes to logic and evidence. He has to shoulder that burden. That's unfair. So in addition to having to shoulder that burden, he has to get attacked by people like Sean McDonough, by Turtle Boy, Jen Altman. These people that have no integrity and no guts. I'd say they're not men, but I don't know about Jen. So let me pull up the other. And I'll play some of these voicemails too in a minute. Hold on 1 second. So this is the limit of my technology. I did this right before the show, so I didn't have time to make it fancy. Again, it's no micro job, but it pulls together in a visual way the timelines. So again, I call this the timeline to second degree. This makes a powerful case that there was a level of intent involved here. I'm going to point that out. Not intending to hit John. All right, so at 12:32, we just saw that John was struck by the SUV. At 12:33, she makes the first call to John. And these calls continue all the way home. At 12:37, she leaves a voicemail that I just played for you. John, I hate you. At 12:42, we hear her entering the garage. At 1:10, she calls her parents. My understanding is they did not hear the call, or they did not accept the call. So again, for people that say, why didn't Brian and Nicole Albert hear their phones when Jen McCabe called them early in the morning? Well, keep in mind, Karen called her parents multiple times, and it was only later that they finally woke up to that call. They didn't even wake up and look at this and call her back. So, the idea that we always wake up, this is their daughter, but they didn't hear the call. Now, at 1:18, she leaves the last voicemail. There is another one left later, but the last voicemail in this stretch in the morning before she maybe takes a nap. So let me, I can also pull that that voicemail up for you guys to hear.
The sixth message, sir, what time was that received by Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
1:18 a.m.
Gentlemen, if you could.
John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit Jimmy. I need to go home. You are fucking using me right now. You're fucking another girl. He's sleeping next to me. You're a fucking loser. Fuck yourself.
Okay. And just so you guys know, I still have not got an email from Lisa. So I'm only loosely following chat. It's hard to do that. So Lisa, I know it's difficult to go on the air here, so there'd be some pressure involved in that. So that's okay. We can talk on the phone later on, and you can tell me if you're comfortable going on here. I'm going to ban Michael for being disrespectful. I've already talked about the key cycles, but I'm going to talk about them again. And I actually have some new evidence that seems to show that there are no missing key cycles. And it really doesn't matter if there were, as I've explained, but I'll go into it again. Stand tight. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, guys. The key cycles were not relevant, but I'm going to go over it. I'm going to show you that there actually were. It did seem to me that there were 3 missing key cycles when I watched the trial, but this chart that was sent to me that was screenshotted seems to show that there were no missing ones. So we'll get into that. Let me go back to the screen. All right. So that voicemail there was at 1:18. Now, in that string of voicemails that begins at 12:37 and ends at 1:18, she's angry at John, she's raging, and she's a theme. She hates him, and the theme is she calls him several times a pervert. So to me, that indicates, and she's also leaving kind of messages like, hey, I'm leaving. I'm going to leave your niece here. She knows how much John loves his nephew and niece that he's raising. And she's basically trying to use that as a tool to get him to come home. Now, to me, she would not be doing that if she thought John was lying there unconscious. So you can try to argue that she was just being clever and try to cover her tracks, but I don't buy that either, because if she was trying to cover her tracks, she wouldn't be saying, I hate you, you pervert. She'd be saying, hey, John, I'll leave the light on when you get home, whatever. So there's no evidence to me that indicates she's trying to cover her tracks here. So I believe that she really did think at that time that John was hooking up with someone. She was a very jealous woman. Okay. Now, the next call to John is at 4:38. And I believe that, and we don't have the exact call log from Karen's phone yet, but I believe that's actually her next call. I'm not sure about that. We'd have to, hopefully we'll be able to get that in evidence. It was in evidence, but it has not been made public. So Karen has claimed that she slept on the couch. Now, she didn't make that claim until later, but I think it holds up as probably true. I think she probably did. She had a lot to drink, and she probably crashed on the couch for a little bit. And I think at that time, when she went to sleep, based on her voicemails, she did not think John was hurt. She did not think John was seriously hurt, if hurt at all. So we don't know. She obviously knew she had been in some kind of an accident. Now, the fact that she called her parents at 1:10 could be an indication that she thought, she was in serious trouble. It could be. It's reasonable to speculate on that. However, the best evidence to me is the fact that she thinks John's cheating on her. So she may have been calling her parents. Maybe she really did just want to go home to get away. I don't know. But at 4:38, things change. She calls John at 4:38. Obviously, he doesn't answer the phone. At 4:40 and at 4:42, she calls her parents. And I believe her father does answer the phone at 4:42. So she finally talks to her dad at 4:42. He was not subpoenaed or interviewed, so we have no idea what that conversation was. However, at 4:45, the niece testified that this is when Karen woke her up because she's screaming in the hallway. Now, this screaming thing is a behavior that goes on for the next couple hours. It's not only testified to by Jen McCabe and by Kerry Roberts, but it's actually in the voicemail that's made on John's phone. So when she arrives at the scene at 6:07, she's in the process of calling John when she spots him on the lawn. She jumps out, leaving her phone on the seat, and it picks up the next 5 minutes of what happens. And in that five minutes, you hear Karen screaming, Carrie, Carrie, Carrie. So this screaming thing had been going on since about 4:45. So it's testified by the niece too. So something had changed. She goes to sleep sometime after 1:18. She's raging at John, but she thinks John's cheating on her. But she no longer says that after that. When she wakes up, now she's telling the niece something's happened to John. Now that thing got in there. At 4:50, I don't know the exact time, but it's roughly 4:50. It could be 4:55. I don't remember the exact time. But that's when Karen goes into the niece's room and has her call Jen, because Karen doesn't have Jen McCabe's phone number, but the niece does. The niece is best friends with Jen's daughter, one of Jen's daughters. And right about 5, so right after that, Karen herself calls Kerry, and Kerry Roberts says John's dead. I'm sorry. She calls Kerry, and Karen tells Kerry John's dead. She hangs up, so she's acting bizarre. And she calls back a minute later, and she says, I think maybe he's been hit by a plow. This is all strange behavior. It's a huge change from the way she was acting between 12:37 and 1:18. She's no longer talking about John hooking up. She's no longer even trying to find out where he might be hooking up. She's not even trying to find out what couch he might have crashed on. She's telling everybody John's dead. Something changed. And what it seems to have been is that she got up, probably a little bit clearer minded, maybe looked at her car again, now in the garage, sees the damage, calls John. He doesn't answer. Finally, now she's pieced it together. That object that she hit earlier was John. And so now she thinks he's dead. And at 6:07, that's when they find John alive. However, again, look at this timeline here. So 4:38, she calls John. That seems to have been right when she woke up from the nap. Calls her parents a couple of times, screaming. She wakes up the niece. She's going crazy. She's freaking out. She calls Jen and says her taillight's broken. She calls Kerry and says John's dead. It's still over an hour later that they find John. But here's the thing. John was alive. John was not dead. Karen was right that she did hit him. She did piece that together, but he was not dead. And this is where the important thing is. This is where second degree comes into place. In all that time, Karen could have called 911 and John was alive out there. She never did. That's intent. Not intent that she wanted John to die. Intent does not have to mean that. Intent means all kinds of things. She made a decision not to call 911 because she probably thought John was dead. But she didn't know that. She didn't even have any indication of that. So if she cared at all about something more than saving her own hide, she would have called 911, and they may have discovered John there a little after 5 o'clock, which is an hour earlier. And he was alive later, so he might have survived. That's murder in the second degree. Now, there are other aspects to the murder in the second degree. The third prong of second degree murder in Massachusetts is basically if you back up in reverse, if you do something that you know or should have known could cause grievous bodily injury to another person. So if you take your car and all of a sudden you drive up at 50 miles an hour on the sidewalk downtown in Boston. You may not have intended to hurt somebody, but you made a decision to do that. And when you kill somebody, it's still second degree because you say you should have known that. So just like if you take a stick of dynamite and you're playing around and you toss it into a mall and it happens to kill somebody, you may not have intended to kill anybody. You may have just been messing around, but you did something that you knew. I think I can take these off now for the moment. So you could take, so that's something that you knew could have caused death or grievous bodily harm. That's second degree. But I think most people, when they look at intent, they want to see something a little stronger than that. And I think here the big thing is Karen could have called 911 and she didn't. And she definitely, maybe she knew earlier at 118 that she hit John, but I don't think there's necessarily evidence for that. But there's pretty clear evidence that she knew after 4:38 because she's no longer saying John's cheating. She's no longer saying where's he hooking up. She's no longer leaving those kind of messages. I think that's the point when it dawns on her that she knows this. So, just a worm. This is the first time. This is the only time I'm going to address you here because you literally have the brain of a worm. But if you go back and watch this from the beginning, you will see that I showed you bulletproof data that matches up the timelines that show to the second how Karen did this. To the second. And if the prosecutor shows a graphic flow chart similar to the one that I did, if he shows that to a jury, he's going to win. Trust me, he's going to win. The only chance that Karen even has once they see something like that is if you get an irrational turtle rider that comes onto the jury with their mind made up. You can find this on Twitter, Little Wormy. I don't think you're interested in the truth, but if you are, go to Twitter, go to my Twitter account and look at this. And this is done by bulletproof, rock solid data. You can't punch a hole in it. You can't. None of this data was questioned by the defense. And it all adds up in a way that nobody could look at this. No serious person could look at this and say that Karen didn't kill John. It's bulletproof. It's that solid. It's not, and this is all stuff that was in the documents. It's all stuff that was presented at trial, just not presented in a very clear and succinct way. It wasn't presented by one witness. So, for instance, Trooper Paul, that had the all-important vehicle data, did not have John's phone data, and he needed that. He probably should have been the person that they let put this together. Trooper Garino had the phone data, but he's not a vehicle data guy. So they have to either give this phone data to Trooper Paul, and it does fall within his purview to have that. I've consulted lawyers like Mahoney on that. Or they have to bring in an independent accident reconstructionist that's more comfortable in front of a jury to put all this together. Either way, and they need to do it with an image like this here. Put it up on the screen that shows it, because to me, any jury look, and then that jury will have this later also when they go in to deliberate. They'll be able to look at this and say, wow, how can you get around this? Because you can't get around it. You cannot get around that evidence. You can't. There's no serious, sane way to get around that. No, I'm ignoring you now, Worm. So you're done, buddy. You no longer have any interest to me. You have about as much interest to me as an actual worm. So we can talk about, as I said, problems in the state, the way they presented the case. So Adam Lally, in his opening statement, said that John was struck at 12:45. In his closing statement, he said 12:30. I don't know if he didn't fully understand the data himself. He was so busy trying to figure out 227 searches and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't know if he hoped the jury would notice. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the strategies are like that. But to me, telling the jury different information like that, that's crucial information, might not be a good idea. But what do I know? I'm just an old bar owner. So again, I don't mean to disrespect Adam Lally. I think he's a good man. I think he's a very, very bright guy, super bright. I'm sure way smarter than me. I think he just got lost in the weeds in this case. He got so busy chasing down aspects of the defense conspiracy theory that he forgot the importance of proving his own case, which all that evidence was there. So in one of my next videos, I'm going to go over a better way to do it. I'm sure he doesn't watch. That's okay. But hopefully someone that maybe is a lawyer or a prosecutor that he has more respect, that he might respect, will watch. Because, man, it is just so easy here to make this case that Karen did this. It's not hard. It really isn't hard. Key cycles. So let me see. So another guy sent me a screenshot of something taken from the trial. And unfortunately, it wasn't very clear. I'm able to see it. So I think it's going to be even less clear when I show it to you guys. I'm not sure if I can find an easy way to show this. Well, I'll give it a shot, though. Yeah, it's not going to be clear. I can't even really read this myself. You'll at least get a sense of what the document is. So if you want to go find it on your own, hopefully we can get a better version of this. So this was the vehicle data document. And it actually seems to show that there were no missing cycles. I haven't studied this enough to verify it. The person who sent it to me did. So, for instance, the way you match up a key cycle, as I've said, is through the mileage that's registered. There's no timestamps on it. And what he shows here is that 2 of the key cycles have the same miles, exactly 12,665. So that's obviously a duplicate. And that would have been the trip home to Dighton. So I don't know. This isn't very clear enough for me to where I can. It's foggy. I used another when I open it up with the other program. I can see it a little bit, but it was still because it was screenshotted. When I make it bigger, it gets blurry. So, but it does seem to be that there are no missing key cycles. However, if there are missing key cycles, that doesn't matter either, because if you can do this search, you can do this research yourself. You can do this yourself. So if you can go to, I like to use ChatGPT. I use the Bing version of it. So you go to Bing, that's Microsoft's search engine, and you go to Copilot, and that's ChatGPT. That's their version of ChatGPT because they own 40% of ChatGPT. Now you got to be careful when you're doing research with ChatGPT to always look at what the source is, because the source can be, it might not be a good source. But so what I did was when I first was looking, I've done it several times. When I was looking at it last night, the first thing that came up was actually a link to a Reddit post about the Karen Read case. I'm like, no, that's not a good source. I'm not going with that. But the next thing that came up, I kept pushing it for more, was actually a link to the website for TechStream. TechStream is the Lexus vehicle data. That's what they use. It's called TechStream. And it explains that there are other posts about this for other cases. It's a matter of different things that can cause these missing cycles. One of them is if the software is not fully matched or doesn't mix well with other software within the vehicle. You can imagine there's always different components that have to, you got software that comes with the car, and there's different systems of software within the car. So there are things that can cause key cycles to go missing, but you're talking about short key cycles. These are key cycles where no event was triggered. So, like I said, your average key cycle has no event in it. And if it was only a short duration, it may not show in the key cycle. So when I talked to an accident reconstructionist, and what they said was that people that are trained on things like this, including TechStream, they're not trained to count backwards from the key in order to link the key cycles to the accident event. So it's not like, for instance, I thought maybe that's how they would do it too. So you have the vehicles in custody of the state police, and presumably say the last time it's used is when Trooper Paul takes it out and tests it out in front of the Canton Police Building. If that's the last key cycle, you can look at, was there another time they took it out? And then you can go back, say, here's the key cycle showing it being driven on into the Sally Port off the tow truck. Then you can look at, was there a key cycle made when it was put on the tow truck in Dighton? Probably not, because I don't think they wouldn't have needed to start the car, but it might have, right? And then there definitely would be a key cycle from Karen driving from One Meadows to her parents' house in Dighton. Then there's a key cycle for Karen going out looking for John and then arriving at Jen McCabe's house. And then they drive back. That's all one key cycle there. And then the key cycle before that is the one where the accident is. So the way they would match it up is they would look at the odometer and they'd be able to match the miles roughly for when Karen went out looking for John and then ended up at Jen's. But then they'd be able to match the miles from when Karen went from, and this would be easier, went from the waterfall to 34 Fairview and then went home to One Meadows. Now, they wouldn't be able to match it exactly because her GPS was off, so they don't know her exact route. So there's a margin of error, maybe by a half mile on that. But that's how they're taught to match the key cycles. There's no timestamps, and they're not taught to count backwards. Look, because there may be missing key cycles. That's just a normal part of it. So the key cycle mystery, it's like a lot of things. It's okay to say this sounds suspicious until you know exactly what's going on. There's nothing wrong with that. Taking some of the videos out. There's nothing wrong with that. But most of these things have explanations. Now, for example, it sounds super suspicious that Brian Higgins took his phone, took his SIM card to a military base to destroy it. That sounds super shady, right? But as we were watching the trial, as soon as Brian Higgins testified that he lived in Brewster, it went off like a light bulb in my head, because Tom Fleming's family owns a cottage in Brewster. And so I've been there to visit him many times, and they don't have a town trash pickup. So his family is, every morning they grab some trash and they take it. Now, if you're someone like Higgins, because you have access to the military base and he drives across that base every day on the way to work, you bring your trash and you drop it off there for free, because if you drop it off when you drop it off at the town drop off, it's not free. So just the normal, natural thing to do would be to take it to the military base, fill up your gas, maybe go to the general store they have there, where I'm sure it's going to be discounted, and then toss your garbage into a dumpster there or into a trash can or whatever. And that's all he was doing, was getting rid of his phone. The SIM card does not have messages on it, photos. It just has identification data on it. So there really wasn't anything suspicious about any of that. It all has a normal, mundane explanation. So I see the name Julie Nagel. I don't know if that's the Julie Nagel that testified, but you did a good job. Sorry you had to go through all that. Or maybe just someone adopting the name Julie Nagel for the purpose of chat. No, Nina, I mean, I have the data. I have the evidence, and I just showed it to you, and it's bulletproof. So, and it's not a matter of me or anybody else being out of the league. Oh, good. Thank you, Ashley. Yes, I'll go on to today's motion. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand this data. You can look at this data that comes from John's GPS, which is rock solid data from his Waze, rock solid data from the health app showing the last time he moved, and it also comes from the vehicle data, which comes from Lexus Toyota. So it's not something that this was presented in trial, and the defense did not try to poke holes in any of this because you can't. So I don't know what to tell you, Nina. Some people are impenetrable to the evidence. As I admit, the state didn't put it together in a clear way, but it is. I'm doing it now, and it's not rocket science. It's very simple stuff. It's so simple, even you could understand it if you wanted to. All right, so let's look at the new motion. Let's see if this is it. Yeah, I got it. All right, I got it right here, and hopefully I'll be able to get it so that it's big enough for people to see. Probably not. All right. This is actually a very interesting motion. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger for you guys. I'm not sure if I can. We may be stuck with this size. All right. So this motion was filed today. Now comes Karen Reed. And they're talking about the double jeopardy laws. The double jeopardy law is that in this country, you cannot be tried twice for the same crime if you are acquitted. So Karen can be tried as many times as possible as long as there's a hung jury. But once a jury acquits her, that's it. She can't be tried again. It doesn't matter. She can walk out onto the courthouse stairs and say, I killed John. I gotcha. She can do that, and they can't charge her. It's double jeopardy. Very important principle of liberty in this country. So, according to this motion by Jackson and Yannetti, the very day after a mistrial was declared, undersigned counsel began receiving unsolicited communications from 3 of the 12 deliberating jurors, indicating in no uncertain terms that the jury had a firm 12-0 agreement that Ms. Reed was not guilty of 2 of the 3 charges against her, including the charge of murder in the second degree. Now we'll see if this holds up. They said 3 jurors, but that doesn't seem to hold up to what they say after. So we'll keep reading. Given the central importance of the acquittals in our criminal system, the defense respectfully submits that the jury's unanimous agreement precludes re-prosecution of Miss Reed on counts 1 and 3. And so that's the second-degree murder and leaving the scene of the accident. And mandates dismissal of those charges. So what they're saying here is the state should not be able to charge her with leaving the scene of an accident or of second-degree murder. That she's been acquitted on that by 12 jurors that voted unanimously on that. We'll see. The defense respectfully requests that a post-verdict inquiry be held on the issue and that the court authorize defense counsel to seek additional proof from the jurors regarding their having unanimously acquitted the defendant of the 2 of the 3 charges. So hopefully we'll get Mahoney on at some point to talk about this, or if he can't, somebody else. But so they actually want to have information about the jurors. It sounds like they almost want to be given contact information so they can get in touch with the jurors. That doesn't seem likely to happen. Not likely, not bloody likely. But I'm not a lawyer, so who knows? So, on July 1st, when the jury presented a note to the court, all counsel were ordered to the courtroom. The note was not presented to counsel. For review. Rather, the court indicated that the jury was at an impasse. Once the jury was seated, the court then read the jury note verbatim in open court and without providing any opportunity for defense counsel to be heard. The court declared a mistrial. In short, neither defense counsel nor the defendant consented to the mistrial, and the court never ascertained from the jury whether its deadlock was in relation to one, two, or all three of the indictments. So I'd love to see what the case law is in this. So first of all, we know that prior to that moment, every single time the jurors sent a note saying they were at a deadlock, that David Yannetti said, well, we want to accept that. We want to dismiss the jurors and declare a mistrial. So every single time he argued for the mistrial. But he's saying here, hey, we weren't given another chance, and maybe we would have changed our minds. Maybe if we knew what the actual count was with the jury, we'd say, hey, we want to get in there. But also my understanding is that I don't even know. I think maybe the judge's hands were tied at that point. Again, I'm not a lawyer, and we'll have to have Kevin on to talk about this. But my understanding is that once this Rodriguez, it's called the Rodriguez instructions. And after a certain amount of times, when the jury has indicated to the court that they're at an impasse, at some point, the judge decides to read them these Rodriguez instructions, which hopefully it's designed to help them hopefully get through that deadlock. But my understanding is that then the judge's hands are bound. Now, I don't think it's bound by statute. It's bound by precedent, but I'm not sure. But that it's bound that once they've read the Rodriguez, if the next time the judge gets a note saying we're at a deadlock, she is required to dismiss them. That's my understanding. So maybe I've oversimplified that. Maybe there's wiggle room where the judge can pull. I don't know, but the defense here is suggesting that they needed to know what the jury count was. So let's get into what they're saying. So, so a juror reached out. Okay. Now this is ridiculous, right? This is the problem. This is why Karen Reed chose to create a zombie horde in order to try to win this case. So on the following day after the mistrial, Attorney Jackson was contacted by a juror in this manner. Contacted by a juror. I remember Kevin talking on this channel that the only time he ever heard, in 35 years, he only heard back from a juror on one of his cases once, and it was he had bumped into them somewhere. And they said, hey, you were the lawyer on this case, and he gave him some information. It's not illegal, but it's just not something that normally happens. And so for a juror to reach out to Alan Jackson the day afterwards, I call bullshit. This is a pink shirt. This is exactly why they tried to pollute this jury pool with this mob. They created this Karen Reed religion, and these are a certain percentage of people that showed up on the jury that were not honest jurors. Now, we know that the alternate juror was not an honest juror. When she was made an alternate, she cried, and the next day wore a pink dress in. She was sending a message. And she's also, I believe, talked to the public and confirmed that. I also know for a fact that the juror that was dismissed the week before that, I know for a fact, I'm going to tell you more about it, but I know for a fact that she was a turtle rider that was saying publicly in public places during the trial that she was a turtle rider. She was saying she was a turtle rider. I don't know how anybody would make that claim, and knowing what we know about this man, I can't think of anything more disreputable than to say you belong to his group. It's disgusting. But she was saying that she was a turtle rider and she was going to acquit Karen. This is during the trial. Okay? Someone like that had to lie to get onto the jury. And this is what they tried to do, was create this mob to get these brainwashed people that would lie to get it on. Now, is Juror A one of these people? We don't know. But to me, it's very, very strange that literally the day after she's reaching out to Alan Jackson, is she looking for a book deal? I don't know. It's shady. It's extremely shady. So, juror A was emphatic that the second degree murder count was off the table, and that all 12 of the jurors were in agreement that she was not guilty of such a crime. Now, I don't know. I mean, my understanding was that they never voted on the second murder in the second degree charge. So we don't know. But she's saying that it was off again, this isn't even consistent. She's saying on the one hand it's off the table, and on the other hand that all 12 of the jurors were in agreement. Well, if it's off the table, you wouldn't be able to know that all jurors were in agreement, because it means you haven't taken a vote. It was off the table. So there may have been an overwhelming feeling or a general agreement that Karen was not guilty of second degree. And I think we all can see that that's not unlikely, considering intent is a difficult thing to prove. But this certainly was not the case that there was a unanimous vote, because there doesn't seem to have been a vote. You can't, and if just the feeling that most people believed that she wasn't guilty of second degree, but that doesn't mean there wasn't one quiet person sitting there thinking, I think she is. So, no, that's not going to hold. So then a day later, all right, so this juror only talked about, oh, no, all right, so she also said that they unanimously agreed that Karen Reed is not guilty of count 3, leaving the scene of the injury or death. Well, this isn't really surprising either, because you can't really prove that she knew that she left the scene where there was an injury. It's very difficult to prove that. There's nothing really in the evidence that shows that, other than the fact that her alarm systems worked and blah, blah, blah. So, we don't know if this juror is telling the truth on that, but it seems reasonable. So it seems wouldn't be shocking to me that there was a general reluctance to want to charge her with second degree, and that pretty much all of them agreed that they didn't prove that she left the scene of the accident. However, that leaves manslaughter. And this is where most of us that have looked at this evidence have always said the most likely result here was a conviction on manslaughter, because the evidence, as I showed you earlier, is bulletproof. Granted, it wasn't showed that way to the jury, but it was bulletproof. It is bulletproof. So then another day later, on July 3rd, Attorney Yannetti was contacted by 2 different individuals. These were not jurors, they were informants. So informants B and C, who had received information from 2 distinct jurors. So somebody's whispering and talking, right? And again, you got these turtle riders, this part of the pink mob that everybody wants to insert themselves into this case, from Lucky Loughran on down. Not everybody, but these people that are brainwashed into believing this shit, they want to insert themselves into the case. So he says hereafter, juror B and juror C, but just as I read this, it's not the actual juror, it's an informant saying they heard this juror said this. So there's no indication that those jurors authorized these people to speak from. So they're just turtle riders. Some of the most dishonest people you could find. So Yannetti said he's provided a screenshot that he received from someone that is one of these informants of text messages that Intimary B had received from the juror. So this is going to be, in theory, in the words of the juror, although it's not proved, and it's screenshot. So basically you have this turtle. Keep in mind, this is what turtle riders do. So he or she is betraying their friend, the juror. So the juror is giving them text messages, and they're going to run and go straight to Yannetti. These people are lowlifes. So anyways, this is the text message purportedly. It was not guilty on second degree and split in half for the second charge, which the second charge being manslaughter. I thought the prosecution didn't prove the case. No one thought she hit him on purpose, or even thought she hit him on purpose. That's a repeat. I don't know why it says that, but informant C had been in contact with another individual, intermediary C, So again, this is someone who talked to someone who talked to someone who talked to a juror. It's unbelievable. Who was a coworker and friend of juror C, and joined a Zoom meeting during which juror C discussed the trial. So we're getting third-hand information here. This not even something that was written by the juror. And this informant C, these turtle writers are all over the state. It's like a plague of dishonest and unintelligent people. Informant C sent Attorney Yannetti the below screenshots of her messages with intermediary C. So again, this is not with the juror. That they had no consideration of murder 2. The manslaughter started polling at 6-6 and then ended deadlocked 8-6, 8 in favor of guilty. So if this is accurate, and there's no reason to believe that it is, at the start, it was split 6-6 and tied on the issue of manslaughter. But that after those days of deliberation, 2 of those people had gone from one side to the guilty side. They'd gone from acquittal to guilty side. So you ended up 8-4. Now, of course, I don't know if we'll see. So Alan Jackson reported with TMZ that his information that it was 9-3 on manslaughter. So again, they're split in their own information on this. So informant C said if it was no consideration for murder 2, shouldn't she have been acquitted on that account? So I think it's an interesting legal question. So if you have a jury that is unanimous that Karen is innocent of murder 2 and unanimous that she's innocent of leaving the scene of the accident, should those charges be dropped and then the state just proceeds with manslaughter? That's a tricky, legal issue, which makes it interesting. And I don't know the answer to it. I mean, if you can establish that it's clear, but how do you establish that? Are you going to go back and poll all 12 of the jurors? Are you're going to put them in a room and make them vote again? I don't know how this would work. It just seems like to me it would be very difficult to make this work. And they talked about some issues with the form. But again, that form was changed in a way that basically reflected what the defense wanted. So, but I'm not sure the form was clear before. I do think they managed to improve the form. I don't think, and this does raise legitimate issues. Should there almost be 3 separate forms for the 3 charges, which would give the jury the chance to acquit on? So if they are able to get a unanimous acquittal on some of the charges, I would agree that those probably should be charged. Those charges, that would be it. She'd be acquitted on those charges. But again, I'm not a lawyer, so this, and I think there are issues on finding out exactly this. Saying that the jurors, one juror saying that the jurors felt that way is not the same as the jurors all voting to acquit and sign off on that form. So I think it's going to be a real uphill battle here. The rest was just precedent stuff. So the defense also respectfully submits that the lack of opportunity to be heard alone is dispositive. Upon receiving a jury note, the court declared a mistrial and excused the jury without consulting counsel. So, as I already explained to you, I don't know, the Rodriguez made it automatic. So I think that's the reason the judge did not consult them. They say that the action was sudden, brief, and unexpected, neither preceded nor accompanied by discussion with counsel. Like I said, my understanding is it's automatic after that Rodriguez charge. So I don't know if it's normal that they would be given a chance. So we could probably go back and look. So, for instance, Judge Canoni just had a mistrial with the Chesney case last year. So curious to see what happened in that case. If I think they did also have to go to the Rodriguez in that. In fact, I believe they maybe had to do it in the retrial too, because again, the jury was deadlocked with one holdout, and Judge Canoni kept forcing him back in, but they eventually did find guilty. But I don't know if the Rodriguez was read in that one. So the defense is at least entitled to conduct post-verdict inquiry. I don't know. Is there precedent for that? Is that true? That seems odd to me. Undersigned counsel did not initiate the communication with jurors A, B, and C. No, just their crazy mob did it, which resulted in the disclosure of information that is memorialized in counsel's affidavits at the appended motion. Should this court find that further factual development is required, the defense respectfully requests that the court conduct a voir dire of the jury. Wow. See, I didn't even know you could. I guess there are probably cases I didn't know you could do that in a case with a hung jury, though. You could see where it would make sense to do it in other cases, like a guilty verdict, to make sure there were not, for instance, issues of race or something like that. Massachusetts law, to the contrary, clearly permitted the jury to return a partial verdict on some but not all of the counts. So they cited a case when that's the case, where that was the precedent. Should the court seek the affidavit of each juror, the defendants asked for the court to authorize undersigned counsel to initiate contact for the sole purpose of asking each jury whether the jury had unanimously agreed that the defendant was not guilty of counts 1 and 3. So once I talk to attorneys, I'm going to have a really interesting conversation on that. I'm sorry that I'm not an attorney myself, so I cannot just give you more than my opinion on that. So just let me head in to say some thank yous. Lou Morocco, as always, thank you. I appreciate the donation very much. I never asked for any, and people can give if they want to, but I'm never seeking that out. And The Dude Abides, one of my favorite movies. In a movement full of sheep, you are the lone wolf. My money's on the wolf here. Well, I have no influence on the case, but the lone wolf has to be Adam Lally. And whatever team they've surrounded him with. So I think Lally's going to do a much better job next time, but he needs a little bit of help. He had to shoulder an enormous load. But we have to be honest about it. There were fundamental mistakes were made in that prosecution, fundamental ones. So it has to be cleaned up. There's too much at stake here. It has to be cleaned up. Sailboat Wolf, thank you. The defense is clearly terrified of a retrial. Well, you would think so, even if we don't know. So my sources indicate 10-2 was the split on manslaughter. But until we really get a juror to come out, and not a turtle rider juror, but a normal, regular, decent human being juror to come out and tell us how things were like, we're not going to know. We may never get that right, but hopefully someone does come out and tell it. Again, I would love it if one of those, especially the jury foreman, would come on this show and just. I think the public needs it for a lot of reasons, because we're in an environment where wild rumor and illogic has turned this into a hysteria, a kind of witch hunt. People are saying things constantly that make no sense. For instance, if you're a juror, you may not understand this, but for instance, people here think that the federal government determined that the accident didn't happen, that Karen that John could not have been killed by a vehicle. No. The U.S. attorney seemingly, there's a lot of evidence for this, corruptly interfered in this case. And they hired these two guys from an independent company called ARCA, ARCCA. And they are qualified, these guys, no question. But again, I'm going to pull this up to show you what I showed at the start of the show. And this is disturbing. This is for anybody parachuting in here. This is from ARCA's website. Okay. This was published in 2021, so before the John O'Keefe death. It's titled Vehicle Data for Toyota and Lexus Accident Investigations. Karen drives a Lexus. So this is the data is called TechStream. Did you know that ARCA's accident reconstructionists are able to access advanced vehicle data from Toyota and Lexus models? Toyota vehicle control history is an exciting new category of vehicle data which includes recorded events from a wide variety of non-collision dependent triggers. So non-collision dependent triggers would include both the events here, the 3-point turn, of course, and then 8 minutes and 4 to 8 minutes and 9 seconds later, when Karen struck John, that there was no collision detected. The reason an event was triggered for that second one there is because she was driving in reverse with the accelerator depressed 75%. The algorithm would detect that as very unusual and create that triggers the creation of an event, which means it records that data from 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after that event. VCH data is imaged from vehicles using Toyota TechStream software. This new tool allows for ARCA's experts to access data relating to vehicle behavior from a larger number of collisions where traditional EDRs may not record an event. Toyota VCH data can contain vehicle speeds, information related to the behavior of various ADAS systems, including the date, time of an event. Now, they obviously weren't able to get that this year. Well, the trooper was not able to get that. There are different data streams here, and he explained why, with the defense team, they went this past early in December and tried to save that data. It's a destructive process when you pull it out of the car, and they lost that data. Now, so that may have had the timestamps in it. That's been my understanding. So, but just this more simpler EDR data does not have timestamps. So not only would that data, which is connected to the entertainment system, not only would it have timestamps, but it can include photographs from the vehicle's forward-facing camera. So I guess not from the rear camera. But even if they had video from the forward-facing camera, that would still tell us a lot, even if it wouldn't show the collision. But they were not able to recover that. Toyota vehicle control history is part of a growing trend of new and exciting methods of accessing advanced data from a variety of vehicle manufacturers. If you have questions related, all right. So again, this is ARCA. They specialize in data from TechStream for accident reconstructions, but these guys didn't get the vehicle data from the feds. The feds didn't offer it to them. They didn't ask for it. They testified on the stand that they didn't need it. This is beyond suspicious. This alone, if you know nothing else about this case, and there's a lot of information about this case that points to very unsettling and corrupt behavior of Josh Levy and the FBI agents. But this alone tells you it's worthy of an investigation by the ethics office and by the inspector general. This is highly suspicious. The fact that these guys are testifying in a murder case and they have no interest in the vehicle data, they're scientists, and they don't want this instrumental data. They were never after the truth. All they were there was to try to confirm with what they knew. However they knew it, they would have talked on the phone to Josh Levy, and he would have said whatever he told them, and they found something to support what he wanted. Now, that level of dishonesty on the part of Josh Levy, he cannot serve another day in that position. Every day that he serves in a position, that he is signing documents, questioning people under oath, playing a major role in serious investigations, every day that goes on, all of those cases are suspect because he can't be trusted. He cannot be trusted with this. With what he does, he's not an honest guy. He's not doing his job honestly. He didn't try to get to the bottom of whether or not there was a conspiracy in the Karen Reed case. No, he tried to prove it for some reason. And even when he knew that there wasn't a conspiracy, because he had gotten very dangerously gotten all the messages from everybody involved, including Courtney Proctor, which is Michael Proctor's sister. Even once he knew, he still had these ARCA guys trying to come up with this in order to interfere with a murder case of a Boston cop. Someone like that cannot be in that position. Can't be. Can't be. Every single day that he goes into the job, that's a travesty. Every single day. Okay, so I think I got through everything today. Let me see if you guys have any questions in here. Ken, thanks for being here, everybody. I appreciate it. And pretty soon we're going to be moving on to different cases. There's only so much more we can do with this case. I do have another thing that I want to eventually run by people. What I've done is I've looked at a way to use narrative form, storytelling principles in order to help the trial, in order to help the jury absorb information. So again, Donkey, I guarantee you want to take an IQ test next to me, I'll take that any day. In fact, I'll take it. I'll give myself half the time that you take. So you can take the full hour or whatever it is. I'll take half. I guarantee I score higher than you. I guarantee it. Not because I'm that smart, because clearly you're not. The evidence here is what it is. It is what it is. You either have the intelligence and the integrity to look at it or you don't. And usually it's just a matter of integrity. It's not a matter of intelligence. The evidence that I showed you today was simple. It's bulletproof. It comes straight from the data. It's not data that could be questioned. And thank you, my friend Pat. Appreciate it. Appreciate it very much, Pat. And we're going to have lunch soon. I don't mean tonight. I mean, we're going to get together and have lunch. Thank you, Merds. Yes, it is. And I know a couple of times, or last week on one of the shows, I did let the idiots get us a little bit warmed up. Bono, like you, man, please easy on the caps. But I know you're trying to get my attention. Appreciate it. But am I covering the TV trial? I mean, well, I don't think the trial has even been scheduled yet, right? He has some kind of a hearing on July 11th. I haven't really been interested in it, but I guess, yeah, I guess we will, because this whole Turtle Boy phenomena is important. Turtle Boy gets a story in the New Yorker. Everybody's grifting on this because all these media sources are looking for numbers and they don't care about the truth anymore. They don't understand that here's a guy out there that's attacking the victim's family on every show. Here's a guy out there that is calling the judge the C word. All right. Just 2 weeks ago during the trial. This is one of the more low-life peoples, but he's developed a following. He's a complete low-life. No integrity. He knows the truth. He's not stupid at all. He's actually a fairly smart guy. He knows that Karen Reed is guilty. He knows it. Trust me. He knows it. But he was duped. And now he can't get out of it. As far as jury misconduct, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't. It's a tough one to go down too. And obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know. It's jury duty is a civic service, so it would be pretty rare to go after somebody on that. If they weren't honest, I don't know. I think that just the voir dire of the jurors needs to be more specific. Needs to be better questions. They need to ask them, for example, have they participated in any social media forums on this case? because it's not as though the judge could ask them, have you heard anything about this case? No, because obviously it's not illegal to say that he did. That it's not illegal for the juror to have known something about the case. The question they have to be asked is whether they're capable of making an independent evaluation. Now, somebody that has participated in a free Karen Read forum or in any way with the Turtle Boy site, they are not capable of making an independent decision. So you need to ask. But if they weren't asked that question, and I don't think they were, then I don't know what you can charge them with. It'd be very difficult to prove that they perjured themselves in any way. So I don't think you're going to see any charges against the jurors. But I do think you need to have a much better job next time by the judge. And I know they have rules they have to go by, so I'm not, but you want a fair jury. That's all. You don't want someone that has their mind made up. Like, for instance, I have jury duty coming up in September, not in Dedham. But let's say they move the trial to my county. And I don't think it's going to be a retried in September. It'd be probably maybe November, right? But let's just say hypothetically it was. And I ended up in the jury pool for this case. Well, I would have to tell them the truth that I'd been doing a show related to this and commenting on court TV generally for the prosecution side of things. So they would have to dismiss me. And that's fair, because I have covered this extensively and I have made up my mind. So I should not be allowed on a jury for this case. There are other levels of that where people, same way. They've had their minds more or less made up by a conspiracy theory put out by a ruthless and dishonest blogger. And now it's not just one. I mean, Sean is putting out absurd and destructive things. I mean, even Turtle Boy says Sean never gets it right. I mean, at least Turtle Boy understands you have to at least have somewhat of a good batting average if anybody's going to, or you risk having people not take you seriously, even your own followers. So I don't think Turtle Boy's putting out a falsehood on every show. Sean is. Sean is crazy. Sean is putting out stuff that someone should do a wellness check. This, like, he's saying things that, but the strange thing is within days it's proved wrong, but it doesn't stop him from continuing to do that. He keeps saying things that are, the feds are coming this and doing this and that. Everything he puts out is wrong, but he now has a national following. Nothing he reports is true. And it's not just that it's wrong. Much of what he reports is cruel. He's a cruel attacks on Jen McCabe. So as far as my track record, I'll take it. I think I've had an outstanding track record on this case. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm just saying, if I didn't, I would have got out of it. I mean, I've covered things fairly. I've given a pretty accurate insight into what's going on from very early on in this case. So, not perfect. Of course, it's not perfect. You want to pick out, especially if you're covering something live like the trial, you want to pick out that one thing or something like that. Great. But I also correct everything if I make a mistake. And as I've given you here with this flow chart that I just gave you, it's bulletproof. You can't fight it. It shows without a doubt that Karen Read did this. The evidence, the data correlates to within seconds. With a margin of error is maybe 5, 10, 15 seconds. It correlates perfectly within that. Unbelievably so. I wonder if you would even get this in a normal case. I mean, it would correlate better if had Karen had her GPS on. Unfortunately, she didn't. But so you would get that data. But the correlation with John's phone data is bulletproof. So, Matt, I haven't been duped. You're the one that doesn't even care about the truth. I just go by the data. I go by the hard evidence. And I did that all along since the beginning. We didn't always have the evidence. We had what we had in the chart. And I go by not rumors, not shit that Karen leaks out through her minions. I knew that stuff was sus. This is one question I would ask people too. You hear evidence that you know is coming from either Turtle Boy or from Sean or from Melanie Little or from Olivia, someone that is clearly working with Karen Reed. Why would you not have a sense of skepticism about that evidence? I'm not saying to dismiss it outright. I'm saying, why wouldn't you just say, this is the defendant. She's on trial for murder. Maybe she has incentive to be selective about what she gives us and sometimes not even truthful. And then when you see, if you followed this case long enough, all the false stuff that these people put out. Melanie Little talking about John's missing belt. It's not missing. Missing shoe. It's not missing. Missing hat. It's not missing. Alan Jackson getting up there and talking about a non-human hair. It's very human hair. It was DNA linked to John. Alan Jackson getting up there and talking about a gap in the library video, which he talked about last May. He didn't bring that up in the trial because there's no gap. So when these people are continuously telling you things that prove to be not true, don't you ever develop a little bit of skepticism about that? Don't you at least stand back and say, whoa, okay, maybe I'm not so sure about this case. Maybe there's some interesting things here that I ought to be looking at. So have a little common sense. Develop a little sense of skepticism. When you walk onto that used car lot, that salesman might not be telling you all the truth about that car you're interested in. Have a little skepticism. And that's all I ask. Be self-aware. We're all prone to things like confirmation bias. Be on the watch for that. But especially people here, I hear this all the time, where people say, I don't believe that Karen is guilty because I know police are corrupt. That's irrelevant. Of course, many police are corrupt. Nobody gives the police the benefit of the doubt in any case. They have to prove that their methods were honest and that their testimony was honest. That's why we have trials. I know a lot of cases where the police were corrupt. But you have to show that there was an opportunity here to plant evidence, and there wasn't. And once you take away the opportunity to plant evidence, there's no chance of a conspiracy. And that's just looking at the data, looking at what time Karen's vehicle was, where it was at all times before it arrived at the Sally Port. Once you know that, that's when you know that. When you know that alone, you know a conspiracy here was super unlikely because there was no opportunity. And then once you start taking a closer look at the other evidence that is all finally come into place since the trial, such as the vehicle data and John's phone data, then you're like, okay, this is just a simple open and shut hit and run case. And that's all it is. It's a simple open and shut case. If, in fact, to some degree that the prosecution or the investigators botched this case, it was because early on they realized it was such a simple case. All right, guys, so we're going to be talking about some new cases soon, and I am going to, sometime within the next week, do an episode with Dave McGrath where we talk about something that was a case that we looked into a lot last summer, where it's an unsolved case that goes back to the 70s. It's Andy Puglisi case. And we're not only going to be talking about this and some similar cases, but what we want to do is reach out to people and say, please, there is somebody out there that knows something. I'm not saying that they were involved. I mean, they just know something that could be useful. And maybe they've been sitting on it. Watch this show and reach out to us. We handle all of this information. I've always handled these things responsibly. I get a lot of information on these things whenever we do these shows, and I always handle them responsibly. Now, this isn't the biggest show in the world, but it's big enough. It does have enough reach. So we'll be talking about the Andy Puglisi case in Lawrence, Massachusetts from 1976. So if you lived in Lawrence, like I did, in that time, pay attention, see if you know anything, reach out. We'll also be talking about another one, David Lewison case in Brockton. Can't remember these off the top of my head. There was another case in Revere. Boy disappeared, 10-year-old boy on his way to the racetrack to shine shoes for money. We have a lot of interesting information on that, but someone else might have more. Reach out to us. There are other cases. We're going to go into them all. So please stay with us. We'll keep following Karen Reed, but we're going to start moving on a little bit from that too. That's to me, that's closed. The information is all there. We know who did it. There's no doubt about the information. But obviously, the next hearing is on the 22nd, and we'll be following that closely. So actually, I will answer Worm one more question. I have a secret recipe for the Long Island iced tea, and I make the best one in the world. So if I had the ingredients, but the problem is with a worm brain, a Long Island iced tea could be dangerous for you. You might go into a coma or something like that. So, all right, guys, enjoy the weather. Thank you for staying with us. Appreciate it. And we will see you